I learned to trust my axe before I trusted my courage. The weight of it in my hand was a certainty, a solid truth in a world of shifting sands and broken oaths. Its haft, worn smooth by my grip, was a testament to drills under the Deroder sun, to the dull routine of the watch, to the quiet moments spent sharpening the edge until it could split a hair. Courage could flee. The light could be distant. But the steel, the wood, the balance of a well-made weapon, that was a promise you kept to yourself. My name is Korgal, and my life was forged in the rhythm of Orgrimmar, a city built on survival's promise. My day began not with the sun, but with the distant, rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer from the Valley of Honor. It was the city's heartbeat, a steady percussion that said we were still here, still armed, still ready. Before the first rays of light bleached the red canyon walls, I was awake on my cot in the barracks. The air was cool and carried the scent of dust, oiled leather, and the lingering smokiness of 100 cooking fires from the night before. Around me, the soft snores and grunts of my fellow soldiers were a familiar chorus. We were the grunts of the Orgrimmar Legion, the backbone, the line of shields and axes that held the heart of the Horde steady. Our lives were not tales for the bards. They were the mortar holding the stones of our nation together. The barracks were simple, functional. Stone walls, thick wooden beams overhead, and rows of cots that offered little comfort but demanded no complaint. My worldly possessions fit into a single chest at the foot of my bed. A spare tunic, a whetstone, a small, carved wolf my father had given me before his final battle, and a water skin that never seemed to hold enough against the punishing heat of our homeland. I would rise, pull on my boots, and strap the leather braces to my forearms. The motion was automatic, a ritual performed in the pre-dawn gloom. It was a preparation for a war that might never come today, but would surely come tomorrow or the day after. Before mess, I always took my axe, Grokmar, a simple name meaning giant's tooth, to the sharpening wheel. The screech of stone on steel was my morning prayer. I watched the sparks fly, each one a tiny, fleeting star in the darkness. I tested the edge with my thumb, a callous-hardened judge of its readiness. An axe was more than a tool. It was an extension of your will. A dull blade meant a failed swing, a parry that came a moment too late. In our world, moments were the difference between a story told and a story ended. Sergeant Grokner, a veteran whose face was a roadmap of old scars, had drilled that into us from our first day. Your weapon is your bond to this world. He would bellow, his voice like rocks grinding together. Treat it with honor, or it will fail you when you need it most. The mess hall was a controlled chaos of noise and steam. The air was thick with the smell of roasted kodo meat, tough but nourishing, and the sharp scent of the coarse bread we ate with it. I sat at a long, scarred table with my squad. There was Brack, young and eager, his tusks barely long enough to be impressive. He saw glory in every order, a saga in every patrol. To his right was Zorka, a darkspear troll shaman who had been assigned to our unit. She was quiet, her long, lanky frame often hunched over a bowl of herbs, her eyes distant as if listening to something none of us could hear. She rarely spoke of the spirits, but you could feel their presence around her, a low hum of power just beneath her skin. Sergeant Grokner sat at the head of our table, eating with a methodical purpose that defined his every action. He saw everything. He noticed the way Brack held his axe with too much pride and not enough respect. He saw the fatigue in the eyes of a grunt who had stood a double watch. He saw the way Zorka's fingers would sometimes trace patterns in the air, calming the dust devils that danced outside the hall. He said little, but his silence was a heavy blanket of authority. He had survived the Scourge in Lord Darren, the Legion at Hydril, and the long, bitter road to Kalimdor. His survival was his creed, and he intended for us to learn it. Our morning duties were often mundane, the unglamorous work that kept a fortress city running. Sometimes it was patrol duty along the high walls, watching the sun rise over the harsh, beautiful expanse of Deroder. The land was a sea of red rock and thorny scrub, a testament to our people's resilience. We had taken a land no one else wanted and made it our heart. From the ramparts, You could see the South Fury River carving its path to the sea, a ribbon of life in a parched world. You could see the distant shapes of thunder lizards moving in the heat haze, and the thorny vines of the quillboar encroaching from the south. It was a land that did not love us, but we had claimed it with blood and honor, and that was enough. Other days, we were assigned to guard duty at the Dranishiar blockade, the fortified gate that led north into Azhara. There, the air was different, tinged with the strange, arcane energies that bled from that broken land. Elven ruins, twisted by ancient magic, were visible in the distance. Our duty there was simple: watch. We watched for incursions, for spies, for anything that smelled of the Alliance or something worse. The boredom was a weapon in itself, a slow-acting poison that could dull your senses if you let it. We passed the time with stories, with games of chance played with carved knuckle bones, with the quiet contemplation of a warrior who knows his peace is temporary. I remember one afternoon on the wall, standing beside Brack. He was restless, his eyes scanning the horizon not for threats, but for adventure. "Do you ever think," he asked, his voice low, "that we'll be more than this? More than just wall guards and patrol grunts? I want to hear the drums of war, Korgel. I want to earn my scars." I looked at him, at the fire in his young eyes, and I saw the ghost of myself years ago. I had felt that same hunger once, but I had also seen what that hunger led to. I had seen the bodies of young orcs, their dreams of glory bleeding out into the dust. "Scars are not earned, Brack," I told him, my voice flat. "They're paid for, and the price is always higher than you think." I turned my gaze back to the horizon. There is honor in the watch. There is strength in the shield that protects our people while they sleep. The war drums will beat again. They always do. Be ready for them, but do not pray for them. He fell silent after that, perhaps pondering my words, or perhaps just dismissing them as the ramblings of a tired, older grunt. I did not care which. The truth of my words would find him one day, whether he was ready for it or not. Some days, my duty took me to the Valley of Spirits, where the trolls and Tauren had made their homes. The air there was different, heavy with the scent of strange incense and the low thrum of ritual drums. Zorka was often there, communing with her Loa or speaking with the elder shaman. I would stand guard, a silent observer of a culture so different from my own, yet bound to us by the oath of the Horde. The Tauren, with their deep, rumbling voices and their reverence for the Earth Mother, were a calming presence. They spoke of balance, of living with the land, not just upon it. It was a lesson my people were still learning, our warrior hearts often too loud to hear the whispers of the world. The trolls of the Valley of Spirits were a study in contrasts. They were wiry and fierce, their rituals filled with a primal energy that could be unsettling. Yet, they were also wise, their connection to the spirits giving them a perspective that spanned generations. I watched Zorka once as she spoke with an old, wizened troll priest. They spoke in their own tongue, a series of clicks and soft gutturals, but I could see the respect in her posture, the way she listened with her entire being. She was not just a shaman of the Horde. She was a daughter of the Darkspear, carrying the weight of her people's history, their exile, and their survival. In that moment, I understood that the Horde was not just an army. It was a tapestry woven from a dozen different threads of honor, survival, and hope. My favorite duty, if such a thing could be said to exist, was training in the Ring of Valor. It was a place of pure, honest combat. No politics, no strategy, just the test of one warrior against another. The sand of the arena floor was dark with the sweat and blood of generations. Here, you learned your limits. You learned the weakness in your guard, the hesitation in your swing. I would spar with other grunts, the clash of our axes a song of strength. We fought not with malice, but with a fierce respect. Every blow was a lesson. Every block was a shared understanding. In the ring, you were stripped down to your essence, your skill, your strength, your will to endure. After a hard day of training or duty, we would often gather at one of the taverns in the Valley of Strength. The air would be thick with the smell of grog and roasted meat, and the sounds of laughter and boastful stories. It was here that the tension of the day could be released. Brack would tell exaggerated tales of his prowess. Zorka would sit quietly, observing everyone with her unervingly perceptive eyes, and Grockner would drink his ale in silence, his presence alone enough to keep the younger grunts from getting too rowdy. These moments were precious. They were the brief pauses in the long, grinding rhythm of a soldier's life. They were a reminder of what we fought for, not just for honor or for the war chief, but for each other, for the right to sit together at the end of the day, share a drink, and know that we had held the line for one more sunrise. I remember one night, an old, grizzled Tauren wanderer came into the tavern. He carried a simple, hand-carved flute. He didn't speak, just sat by the fire and began to play. The melody was haunting, filled with the vast, lonely spaces of the barrens. It spoke of the wind sweeping across the plains, of the silent wisdom of the stars, of loss and endurance. The tavern fell silent. The boisterous grunts, the weary merchants, the stoic guards, we all listened. In that music, we heard our own stories. The long journey from another world, the struggle to find a home, the ghosts of those we had lost along the way. When he finished, no one applauded. We just sat in a profound, shared silence. It was a deeper communion than any battle cry. It was the soul of the Horde, laid bare in a simple, mournful song. Life in Orgrimmar was a cycle. The hammer falls, the sun rises, the watch changes. We were cogs in a great machine of survival. But we were not unthinking. We were orcs, Tauren, trolls, goblins, and Forsaken. We were a collection of broken peoples who had found strength in a shared promise, that we would never be slaves again, that we would carve our own destiny in this world, with axe and spear, with spirit and steel. And as I lay on my cot at night, listening to the city's heartbeat fade into a low hum, I knew my place in it. I was a grunt, a shield, a single, steady note in the long, grim, and honorable song of the Horde. And for me, that was enough. That particular cycle was broken on a morning that felt no different from any other. The air was already thick with heat, the sun a merciless eye in a bleached white sky. I had just finished my patrol along the upper ramparts, my eyes tracing the familiar, jagged line of the northern barrens to the west. The dust devils danced in the distance, and the only sounds were the wind and the cry of a lone carrion bird circling high above. It was a morning of deceptive peace, the kind that often precedes a storm. I felt a prickle of unease on my skin, a subtle shift in the air that a warrior learns to recognize. It was the feeling of something waiting, something coiled in the shadows just beyond your sight. I was cleaning my axe in the barracks courtyard when the summons came. It was not the city-wide alarm, the deep, resonant bellow of the great war horn that signaled a major attack. It was a runner, a young orc with the sigil of the Warchiefs' command on his tunic. He was breathless, his face slick with sweat. He found Sergeant Grockner sharpening a dagger on a whetstone, his movements precise and economical. The runner handed him a sealed parchment scroll. Grockner broke the wax seal with his thumb and read the contents, his expression unchanging, a mask of granite. His eyes, however, narrowed almost imperceptibly. Korgel, Brack, Zorka, he grunted, his voice a low rumble. Gear up, full patrol kit. We have orders. He didn't need to say more. The tone of his voice carried the weight of the command. This was not a routine patrol. This was a task. Brack's eyes lit up with that familiar, hungry fire. He practically slammed his axe into its harness, a grin splitting his face. Zorka, who had been meditating nearby, opened her eyes slowly. There was no surprise in them, only a calm, patient acceptance. She rose to her feet in a single, fluid motion, her collection of totems and fetishes clinking softly at her belt. As I gathered my gear, I felt a familiar tightening in my gut. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was the cold, clear focus that came before action. I checked the straps on my shield, the edge of my axe, the supply of water in my skins. Every piece of equipment was a pact I made with survival. A loose strap, a frayed rope, a dull blade. Any of them could be a fatal betrayal. The barracks buzzed with a low energy as other squads were assembled. The news was spreading in hushed tones. Trouble to the south. The Quillbore. Again, we assembled in the Valley of Strength, before the imposing structure of Hold. The sun beat down on the packed earth, and the red banners of the Horde hung limp in the still air. Our unit was small, just the four of us. This was not a war party. It was a reconnaissance mission, a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Grockner unrolled the parchment and briefed us, his voice clipped and devoid of emotion. Reports from the southern Barrens border. Quillbore raids. More aggressive than usual. They've overrun an outlying farmstead, killed the peons. Their shamans are whipping them into a frenzy. Our task is to scout the area, assess their strength, and find the source of their agitation. We are to engage only if necessary. Avoid a full-scale confrontation. Brack scoffed under his breath. Avoid a confrontation? They are Quillbore. We should wipe them from our lands. Grockner's head snapped towards him, his eyes like chips of flint. You will follow your orders, Brack. You will use your head, not your rage. Rage is a weapon, but it is a clumsy one. It breaks easily and often wounds the one who wields it. Is that understood? Brack's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Yes, Sergeant. The words were spoken through clenched teeth. Before we departed, Zorka performed a small ritual. She knelt, placing a hand on the dusty ground. She closed her eyes and began to chant in a low, rhythmic whisper. The language was Zandali, the ancient tongue of her people. I felt a faint tremor in the earth beneath my feet, a subtle shift in the air. The oppressive heat seemed to lessen for a moment. She opened her eyes, and they seemed to glow with a faint inner light. The spirits of this land are angry, she said, her voice a soft rasp. Something vexes them. The earth cries out. Grockner just grunted, a sound of acknowledgement, not dismissal. He had seen enough in his long years to respect the ways of the shaman, even if he did not understand them. Then we will find what angers them and silence it, he said, his hand resting on the pommel of his own well-worn axe. He looked at each of us in turn, his gaze lingering for a moment. It was not a look of affection, but of assessment. He was weighing our readiness, our resolve. For the Horde, he said, the word's a simple statement of fact, not a rallying cry. For the Horde, we answered in unison. Our oath was given. Our duty was clear. The summons had come, and we were ready to answer. We marched out through the main gates of Orgrimmar, leaving the relative safety of its high walls behind. The transition was always jarring. One moment, you were surrounded by the sounds and smells of your people, the solid certainty of stone and steel. The next, you were in the vast, unforgiving wilderness of Duroder. The sun was a physical weight pressing down on us. The air was dry and tasted of dust. The world was shades of red and brown, broken only by the hard green of stubborn cacti and the bleached white of ancient bones. Our pace was steady, a ground-eating stride that could cover miles without exhausting us. Grockner led the way, his eyes constantly scanning the terrain, noting every rock formation, every dry wash, every potential ambush point. I walked behind him, my shield on my back, my axe in my hand. The familiar weight was a comfort. Zorka walked beside me, her long, lanky stride effortless. She moved with a strange grace, her senses seeming to extend beyond the physical. She would occasionally pause, tilting her head as if listening to a sound only she could hear, her eyes fixed on something unseen in the distance. Brack brought up the rear, his initial excitement slowly being baked out of him by the relentless sun. He was still eager, but the reality of the march was setting in. This was the unglamorous part of a warrior's life, the long, hot, thirsty miles between the order and the battle. We spoke little. The march was a time for conservation of energy, for observation. The landscape of Duroder was a harsh teacher. It taught you to watch where you place your feet, to listen for the hiss of a venom-backed basilisk, to be wary of the scorpion that scuttled under a rock. Every living thing in this land was a survivor, armed with fang or claw or poison. It was a good reminder that we were not masters of this place, merely its most determined inhabitants. As we moved south, the terrain began to change. The open, rocky plains gave way to a more broken landscape of canyons and mesas. The thorny vines of the quillbore became more common, thick, menacing barricades of nature's own design. We saw the signs of their increased activity. Tracks, more numerous and fresher than they should be, and crude, aggressive totems planted in the earth. They were carved with snarling boar faces and smeared with what looked like fresh blood. Zorka paused at one, her long fingers tracing the carvings without touching them. "There is a fever in their magic," she whispered. "It is not the usual anger of their gods. It is frantic, desperate." We found a farmstead late in the afternoon. It was a grim sight. The small, mud-brick buildings were burned out, their thatched roofs collapsed into smoldering piles of ash. The fields of tough, desert grain were trampled and ruined. And there were bodies. Peons, their simple lives of labor ended in brutal violence. Grockner walked through the scene with a cold, professional detachment, but I saw the muscles in his jaw clench. The Horde protected its own. This was a violation, an insult that could not be ignored. Brack's hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists, his knuckles pale beneath the green skin. "The swine," he growled, his voice thick with rage. "They will pay for this." Zorka moved among the fallen, her expression one of deep sorrow. She knelt by one of the peons, a female with a child's toy clutched in her hand, and murmured a quiet prayer, asking the spirits to guide her to the ancestors. It was a small gesture of peace in a place of utter violence. I stood guard, my eyes scanning the surrounding rocks. The attack had been recent. The air still smelled of smoke and blood. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. This was not a simple raid for food or water. This was a massacre. There was a savagery here that went beyond the normal territorial aggression of the quillbore. Grockner found tracks leading away from the farmstead, heading deeper into the canyons to the south. "They came in force," he said, pointing to the churned-up earth, "and they went back to their dens." We follow as dusk began to settle, casting long, distorted shadows across the canyon floor. We made our first contact. It was not a battle, but a fleeting, violent encounter. A trio of quillbore scouts, their bodies painted with white, chalky symbols, burst from behind a cluster of boulders. They charged with guttural shrieks, their crude spears leveled. They were fast, their movements jerky and unpredictable. Brack met the first one with a roar, his axe a blur of motion. There was a wet crunch as it bit deep into the quillbore's shoulder, sending it staggering back. I moved to intercept the second, planting my feet and raising my shield. The spear slammed into the wood with a force that jarred my arm to the shoulder. I grunted, held my ground, and thrust with my axe, a short, brutal strike to the creature's leg. It howled and stumbled. Before it could recover, Grockner was on it, his own axe moving with a deadly efficiency that was terrifying to behold. 2 quick strikes, and the quillbore was down. The third scout was Zorka's. It charged at her, perhaps seeing her as the weakest target. It was a fatal mistake. She didn't move to attack. Instead, she stamped her foot on the ground and uttered a single, sharp word. The earth beneath the quillbore's feet erupted, a fist of stone rising up to slam into its chest. The creature was thrown backward, its charge broken, its chest caved in. It lay still, a look of stunned surprise on its brutish face. The entire encounter had lasted less than 10 seconds. It was a stark reminder of the sudden, brutal nature of our work. We stood in the silence of the canyon, the bodies of the scouts at our feet. The fight had been short, but it had been a test. Brack was breathing heavily, the adrenaline of his first real combat fading, leaving him pale. Zorka stood over the quillbore she had killed, her expression unreadable. Grockner was already examining the bodies. "Look at their eyes," he said, nudging one with his boot. I knelt down. The quillbore's eyes were wide, bloodshot, and filled with a frantic, mindless rage. There was no cunning in them, no spark of intelligence, just a raw, burning fury. Zorka confirmed our suspicions. "Their spirits are tainted," she said, her voice low and troubled. "Something has poisoned their connection to the wild gods they worship. This is not the strength of their ancestors. It is a sickness. She pointed to the white symbols painted on their skin. They were not the traditional markings of their tribes. They were jagged, chaotic, and seemed to hurt the eyes to look at them. The first clash was over, but it had only deepened the mystery. This was more than just a Quilboar uprising. There was a guiding hand behind this, a malevolent intelligence that was twisting these creatures into something more dangerous, more unpredictable. We were no longer just on a reconnaissance mission. We were hunting for a poison, and we were getting closer to its source. The canyon grew darker, the air colder. The real fight was still ahead of us, waiting in the thorny depths of the Quilboar dens. And for the first time, I felt a genuine sliver of fear, not for the Quilboar, but for the unknown power that was driving them. We pressed on into the encroaching darkness, the canyon walls closing in around us. The moon was a sliver of bone in the sky, offering little light. Zorka's shamanistic abilities became our eyes. She whispered a soft incantation, and a faint, ethereal glow emanated from her hands, illuminating the path just enough for us to see the treacherous footing. It was a soft, blue-green light that seemed to absorb sound, making our passage eerily silent. The only noises were the crunch of our boots on gravel and the whisper of the wind through the thorny crevices. The entrance to the Quilboar den was a gaping maw on the side of a large mesa, a natural cave system expanded and fortified with a tangled wall of massive, thorny vines. The air flowing out of it was foul, a thick, cloying stench of filth, rot, and something else, something metallic and vaguely sweet that made the back of my throat itch. It was the smell of corrupted magic. Fel Mogith. My hand tightened on the haft of my axe. This changed everything. The Legion's touch was a cancer, and even a hint of it was a threat that had to be cut out, root and stem. Grockner held up a hand, signaling a halt. We took cover behind a rock outcropping, observing the entrance. Two heavily armed Quilboar stood guard, their brutish forms silhouetted against the faint light from within the den. They were larger than the scouts we had encountered, their hides thick with scars and their tusks long and yellowed. They paced restlessly, their movements agitated and jerky, their heads constantly twitching as if listening to maddening whispers. The same chaotic white symbols were painted on their armor and skin. This is no longer a simple scouting mission, Grockner stated, his voice a low growl that was barely audible over the wind. Fel magic is at work here. That means a warlock or a cultist. Someone is using these swine as a private army. He looked at each of us, his gaze hard. Our orders were to assess and report. But we cannot leave a font of fell corruption this close to Orgrimmar. We go in. We find the source. We destroy it. Brack's eyes gleamed with a feverish intensity. This was the battle he had been craving. But even his youthful arrogance was tempered by the grim reality of what we faced. Fel magic was not an honorable opponent to be met on the field of battle. It was a disease that twisted and defiled everything it touched. Zorka's face was a mask of grim determination. "The spirits will aid us," she said softly. "They hate this corruption more than we do. The earth itself will fight against it." Our plan was simple, brutal, and efficient. Zorka would handle the guards. Grockner, Brack, and I would be the spearhead, punching through the entrance and driving deep into the den. We would move fast, hit hard, and not stop until we found the heart of the corruption. There was no room for hesitation, no time for second thoughts. In a fight against the Fel, momentum was everything. To stop was to be surrounded and overwhelmed. Zorka crept forward, her lanky form blending into the shadows with an unnatural ease. She moved like a phantom, her feet making no sound on the rocky ground. She placed a small, carved totem on the ground, a simple wooden effigy of a wolf. She whispered to it, her breath fogging in the cool night air. The totem pulsed with a faint green light, and then two shapes detached themselves from the darkness. They were spirit wolves, their forms translucent and shimmering, their eyes burning with a cold, predatory light. They were silent, utterly silent, as they loped forward, flanking the two guards. The attack was simultaneous and devastating. The spirit wolves lunged, their ethereal jaws closing on the throats of the quillbore. The guards had no time to cry out. Their roars of alarm choked into gurgling whimpers. They thrashed for a moment, clawing at the spectral predators that were tearing the life from them, and then collapsed into lifeless heaps. The spirit wolves faded back into the night as quickly as they had appeared. The path was clear. "Move!" Grockner hissed. We sprinted from our cover, our boots silent on the dusty ground. We passed the bodies of the guards, their eyes wide with a final, shocking terror. We plunged into the foul-smelling darkness of the quillbore den. The tunnel was narrow and sloped downward, the walls slick with some foul-smelling slime. The air was thick and hard to breathe, filled with the stench of unwashed bodies and the taint of the fell. Faint, greenish light flickered from deeper within, cast by crude torches burning with some alchemical accelerant. The den opened into a large cavern, a chaotic mess of crude pens, piles of filth, and sleeping quillbore. The place was a hive of them, dozens packed into the cramped space. A large, brutish quillbore with a notched ear, likely a chieftain, was bellowing orders at a group of others, who were sharpening crude iron blades on a grinding stone. They were preparing for another raid. We had arrived just in time. This was the moment of truth, the point where the mission shifted from stealth to open war. There would be no subtlety here. Grockner let out a roar, a true Orcish battle cry that echoed off the cavern walls, a sound of pure, concentrated fury. For the Horde, it was the signal. We charged into the heart of the cavern, a three-orc wave of destruction. Brack was on my right, his axe swinging in a wide, reckless arc, a howl of pure joy and rage on his lips. Grockner was a whirlwind of controlled violence, his movements economical and utterly lethal. I raised my shield, deflecting a thrown spear, and crashed into the line of quillbore. My axe bit deep into the first one, and I kicked it away, moving on to the next. The cavern erupted into a maelstrom of chaos. The air filled with the shrieks of enraged quillbore, the clang of steel on crude iron, and the wet, percussive sounds of axe meeting flesh. Zorka was behind us, her hands alight with power. A chain of lightning erupted from her fingers, arcing between three quillbore, leaving them smoking and twitching on the ground. She slammed a totem into the earth, and a wave of healing energy washed over us, mending a shallow cut on my arm that I hadn't even noticed I'd received. We fought as a unit, a well-oiled machine of death. I held the line, my shield a bulwark against their numbers, creating openings for Brack and Grockner to exploit. Brack fought with a wild, untamed fury, his axe a constant blur. He was effective, but he was leaving himself open, his desire for glory overriding his training. Grockner was the opposite, a rock in the swirling tide of battle. Every move he made had a purpose, a block, a parry, a deadly counterstrike. He fought not with rage, but with a cold, hard certainty. We were cutting a path through them, driving them back, but their numbers were immense. For every one we cut down, two more seemed to take its place, their eyes burning with that same mindless, fell-driven rage. They felt no fear, only a desire to kill and be killed. This was not a battle against warriors. It was an extermination of diseased animals. And deep within the caverns, I could feel it, a pulsing, rhythmic throb of dark energy. It was the source, the warlock. We were getting closer. The revelation came not as a whispered secret, but as a roar from the depths of the quillbore warren. As we carved our way through the main cavern, pushing back the frenzied swarm, a new enemy emerged from a larger tunnel at the far end. It was a massive quillbore, easily twice the size of the others, its hide a patchwork of scars and weeping, green-tinged sores. Its eyes were not merely bloodshot. They glowed with a sickening, internal light, the unmistakable sign of deep fell corruption. Jagged shards of green crystal protruded from its shoulders and back, pulsing with a malevolent energy. This was their champion, a creature twisted and empowered by the dark magic we had come to destroy. It wielded a weapon that was not forged, but grown, a massive club of bone and dark iron, wrapped in the same thorny vines that choked this land, all of it dripping with a viscous, green fluid that sizzled when it hit the stone floor. The creature let out a bellow that shook the very rock around us, a sound of pure agony and rage. The other quillboar fell back, a mixture of fear and reverence in their frenzied eyes. This was our true opponent, the warlock's pet. Brack on the left flank, Korgel with me. Zorka disrupt its magic. Grockner's commands cut through the din of battle. There was no hesitation in his voice, only the cold calculus of a commander facing a superior foe. This was no longer about culling the herd. This was about felling a monster. We fell into formation, a triangle of Horde steel and shamanic power. The brute charged, its movements surprisingly fast for its size. It swung its massive club in a wide, horizontal arc, aiming to sweep all three of us off our feet. I planted my shield, bracing for an impact I knew I couldn't fully absorb. Grockner was a step ahead. Down, he roared. We dropped to a knee just as the club whistled over our heads with the sound of falling meteor. The force of the swing alone was a physical blow. Brack, however, in his eagerness, had not heeded the command fully. He had only ducked, and the club caught him a glancing blow on the shoulder. I heard the crack of bone, and he cried out, stumbling back, his arm hanging limp at his side. Brack, get back! I yelled, my voice raw. But the brute was already turning, its glowing eyes fixing on the injured, easiest target. It raised its club for an overhead smash, a killing blow. In that moment, a choice had to be made. My mission was to follow Grockner, to press the attack on the monster. My duty was to my comrade. There was no time to think. I reacted. I threw myself forward, my shield raised high, and slammed into the brute's leg. It was like hitting a stone wall, but it was enough. The impact, combined with my weight, threw the creature off balance for a split second. Its devastating smash went wide, the club cratering the ground where Brack had been standing a moment before, sending shards of rock flying. Zorka now, Grockner bellowed, seizing the opening I had created. He lunged in, his axe ablur, striking at the monster's exposed side. The blade bit deep, and the creature roared in pain, green-black blood welling from the wound. At the same time, Zorka thrust her hands forward. A bolt of pure natural energy, a wrath spell, slammed into the brute's face. It staggered back, momentarily blinded, shaking its massive head. I scrambled back to my feet, pulling Brack with me. His face was pale with shock and pain. My arm, it's broken, he gasped. Get behind me, I ordered, pushing him towards the relative safety of the cavern wall. You are done fighting. He started to protest, his pride wounded more than his body, but a look from me silenced him. The fury in my eyes was not for him, but for the creature that had hurt him, and for his own foolishness that had allowed it. He had sought his scars, and now he had one. I prayed it would not be his last. The fight became a desperate dance. Grockner and I worked to keep the monster's attention, harrying it, forcing it to turn, to expose its weaknesses. He was a blade, I was the wall. I would block a blow with my shield, the impact rattling my teeth, and he would use that moment to land a strike. We were wearing it down, but it was taking a toll on us. My shield arm was numb, and my breath was coming in ragged gasps. The fell energy radiating from the beast was a poison, sapping our strength, making our movements sluggish. Zorka was our anchor. She stayed at a distance, her spells a constant barrage. She summoned grasping roots from the stone floor to tangle the monster's legs, slowing its charges. She hurled bolts of lightning that sizzled against its corrupted hide. She placed a healing stream totem near our feet, a gentle font of green energy that mended our minor wounds and gave us the endurance to keep fighting. Without her, we would have been crushed in moments. We had to end it. We couldn't outlast this thing. During a brief lull, as the monster roared in frustration, Grockner caught my eye. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod towards the creature's leg, the one I had struck earlier. It was favoring it. A plan formed between us in that single, silent glance. It was a desperate gamble, but it was all we had. We had to break it to bring it to the ground. Our vows to the Horde, to each other, burned hotter than the fell fire in the monster's eyes. Our fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fire of resolve. We would not fall here. We would not let this corruption stand. The ordeal was a blur of pain and desperation. The cavern was a symphony of hellish sounds. The monster's guttural roars, the sharp clang of our axes against its hide, Zorka's chanted incantations, and our own ragged breathing. The air was thick with the stench of fell blood and ozone from the lightning spells. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest, my shield arm a dead weight of agony. But we held the line. We had to. Grokner initiated the new plan. He feinted high, drawing the monster's attention upwards. The brute took the bait, raising its massive club to swat him like an insect. As it shifted its weight, I charged, ignoring every instinct for self-preservation. I aimed not for its body, but for its knee, the one on the leg it had been favoring. I put all my weight, all my strength, all my fury into the blow. My axe struck with a sickening crunch of breaking bone. The monster let out a shriek that was a mixture of rage and pure animal pain. Its leg buckled, the massive limb bending at an unnatural angle. It began to fall. It was like watching a mountain crumble. It toppled sideways, its immense bulk crashing to the cavern floor with a ground-shaking thud that knocked me off my feet. But the cost of my attack was steep. As it fell, it flailed, and its club swung wildly. I tried to roll away, but I was too slow, too exhausted. The heavy, corrupted weapon slammed into my shield. The shield, my trusted companion, my bulwark, splintered into a dozen pieces, the force of the blow throwing me backward like a discarded toy. I hit the cavern wall hard, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. My vision swam, black spots dancing before my eyes. My axe clattered from my numb fingers. I was disarmed, my shield gone, my body a mass of bruises. I saw the monster, even with a shattered leg, pushing itself up, its glowing eyes fixing on me. I was helpless. This was the end. I had traded my life to create an opening. It was a worthy trade, I thought in that fleeting final moment, for the Horde. But the end did not come. A figure moved between me and the fallen behemoth. It was Brack. His face was a mask of pain and grim resolve. In his one good hand, he held his axe. He had disobeyed my order to stay back. He had come to defend his defender. No. I tried to yell, but the word came out as a choked gasp. He was in no condition to fight. The monster swiped at him with a massive clawed hand. Brack, with a surprising agility born of desperation, dodged under the blow. He couldn't win. He couldn't possibly survive. He was just by me seconds. But then, an assist came from the one I had almost forgotten in the heat of the melee. Grokner. While the monster was focused on me and then on Brack, the old sergeant had not been idle. He had climbed onto the creature's back. With the monster now propped up on its arms, trying to crush the annoying grunt before it, its thick neck was exposed. Grokner stood on its shoulders, his legs braced, his face a mask of utter concentration. He raised his axe high, both hands gripping the haft. The weapon seemed to absorb the dim, green light of the cavern, its edge glowing with a deadly promise. He brought it down with all the force of his veteran's body, all the weight of his long, hard years of survival. The axe plunged deep into the base of the monster's skull. There was no roar, just a sudden, sharp exhalation of air, a final, shuddering gasp. The light in its eyes flickered and died. The immense body went limp, collapsing completely to the ground. The battle was over. Silence descended upon the cavern, a heavy, profound quiet broken only by our own harsh, ragged breaths. We had won, but the cost was written on our bodies, on my shattered shield, on Brack's broken arm. We had survived the ordeal, not through overwhelming strength, but through sacrifice, trust, and the timely intervention of a comrade who refused to stand aside. Brack looked back at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear, relief, and a newfound, sober understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. He had earned his scar, and in doing so, he had learned the lesson I tried to teach him with words. Some lessons can only be learned in blood. The silence in the cavern was a heavy shroud. We stood, swaying with exhaustion, amidst the carnage we had wrought. The bodies of dozens of quillboar lay scattered across the floor, and the colossal, still form of their fel-infused champion dominated the center of the room. The throbbing, malevolent energy that had filled the cavern had ceased. With the death of its champion, the warlock's hold on this place felt weaker. Grockner slid off the monster's back, landing with a soft thud. He methodically cleaned his axe on the creature's hide, his face grim and unreadable. He walked over to Brack, his eyes assessing the younger orc's broken arm. "You were a fool to re-enter the fight," he said, his voice flat. Brack flinched, expecting a reprimand. But Grockner continued, a grudging respect in his tone. "You were a brave fool. You saved Korgul's life. You remembered that the warrior next to you is more important than the enemy in front of you. There is hope for you yet." He ripped a strip of cloth from a fallen quillboar's banner and began to fashion a crude sling for Brack's arm. I pushed myself to my feet, my body protesting with a chorus of aches and pains. My shield was gone, a pile of splintered wood and bent metal. I felt its loss like a missing limb. I retrieved my axe, its familiar weight a small comfort in the aftermath. Zorka came to my side, her hands glowing with a soft, green light. She placed them on my chest, and a wave of warmth spread through me, easing the worst of the pain, mending the bruised ribs and knitting together the torn muscles. "You fought with honor, Korgul," she said softly. "You protected your kin. Our immediate task was to consolidate our position. We couldn't assume the entire den was empty." Grockner gestured to the larger tunnel from which the champion had emerged. "The warlock," he grunted, "the head of the serpent. It is still in there. We had to finish the job. We couldn't leave this font of corruption to fester." We left Brack at the entrance to the tunnel, armed with a captured quillboar spear he could use with his good hand. His job was to stand guard, to warn us of any reinforcements from behind. His fighting days were over, but his watch was not. The three of us, Grockner, Zorka, and I, proceeded into the final tunnel. It was narrower than the others, and the walls were covered in pulsating, green glowing runes. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness of fell magic, so dense it was almost hard to breathe. At the end of the tunnel was a small, circular cavern, a natural chamber that had been converted into a profane laboratory and sanctuary. Vials of glowing green liquid stood on crude rock shelves, skulls of various creatures were arranged in ritualistic patterns, and in the center of the room, a warlock was frantically trying to complete a ritual. He was an orc. The realization hit me like a physical blow. A traitor. He was gaunt, his skin a sickly pale green, his eyes burning with the fell fire of his dark pacts. He was a remnant of the old Shadow Council, or a new convert to its damned cause. He saw us and snarled, his ritual broken. He was not a warrior. He was a coward who relied on forbidden power. He hurled a bolt of shadow at us, which I intercepted with the haft of my axe, the dark energy washing over me with a life-draining chill. The fight was short and brutal. He had no hulking minion to protect him now. Zorka grounded his magic, slamming a totem into the floor that seemed to absorb his power, causing his spells to fizzle and die. Grockner and I closed the distance. He tried to summon a demon, but Grockner's axe cut short the incantation, and my own swing took him in the side, ending his miserable life. He fell without honor, a stain on our people, a reminder of the darkness we had fought so hard to escape. With the warlock dead, the last of the fell energy in the cavern dissipated. The glowing runes on the walls faded into inert scratches on the stone. The foul air began to clear. We had done it. We had cut out the heart of the corruption. We systematically destroyed his profane laboratory, smashing every vial, burning every scroll, desecrating every ritual circle. We would leave nothing of his taint behind. We emerged back into the main cavern to find Brack standing his post, his face pale but resolute. The remaining quillboar, their minds now free from the warlock's maddening influence, were in a state of confusion and terror. Seeing us, they did not attack. They fled, squealing and scrambling over each other to escape the den of their tormentor. We let them go. Our fight was not with them. Not anymore. They were just pawns, victims of a greater evil. The final task was the grimmest. We honored our fallen. Not our own, for by some miracle, we had all survived. But the peons of the farmstead. We could not give them a proper funeral pyre, but we could offer them the respect of a warrior's remembrance. We gathered outside the den as the first hints of dawn touched the sky, painting the eastern horizon in shades of purple and orange. We stood in a circle, and Grockner spoke. "We came here to do our duty," he said, his voice low and rough. "We faced a hidden enemy. We fought with honor. We protected our people. The task is done." He looked at each of us. "Brack's arm is broken. Korgul's shield is lost. We are all wounded in body or in spirit. This is the price of our victory. Let us remember it." Zorka then offered a prayer to the spirits, asking them to cleanse the land of the fell taint, to bring peace back to the troubled earth. We did not have a full report to give, not yet. We knew a warlock was responsible, an orc warlock, but we did not know if he was working alone or if he was part of a larger conspiracy, a hidden coven. What we had accomplished here was a victory, but it also opened up new, troubling questions. The war for our people's soul was never truly over. It was a constant vigil against the shadows, both without and within. As we prepared for the long march back to Orgrimmar, the rising sun cast our long shadows behind us. We were weary, wounded, but we were alive, and we had held the line. The march back was a slow, arduous affair. We were all nursing injuries, and the adrenaline of combat had long since faded, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. Brack was in considerable pain, his broken arm carefully supported by the makeshift sling. He bore it with a stoicism that would have made Grockner proud, his earlier arrogance replaced by a quiet, hard-won maturity. He no longer walked with a swagger. He walked with the careful tread of a warrior who understood his own mortality. He had faced the true face of battle, and it had changed him. I felt the absence of my shield more keenly with every step. My left arm, accustomed to its weight and balance, felt unervingly light. I kept reaching for it out of instinct, my fingers finding only empty air. It had been more than just a piece of equipment. It had been a part of me. Its loss left me feeling exposed, vulnerable. It was a stark, physical reminder of the price we had paid in that dark cavern. We had won, but we had not emerged unscathed. We left pieces of ourselves in every battle, small chips of spirit and body that could never be fully reclaimed. Zorka walked beside me for a time, her usual silence a comfortable presence. She noticed my unease. "A shield can be remade," she said, her voice a soft rasp. "The arm that wields it is what matters. Your arm is still strong, Korgul. Your spirit is unbroken." She was right, of course. But the truth of her words did little to fill the empty space at my side. I had learned to trust my shield. Now, I would have to learn to trust myself without it. As we crested the final ridge and the familiar, imposing silhouette of Orgrimmar came into view, I felt a profound sense of relief. The red rock canyons, the smoke rising from the forges, the banners snapping in the wind. It was home. It was what we had been fighting for. The city looked different now, though. It seemed more fragile, more precious. Before, it had been a fortress, a symbol of our strength. Now I saw it as a sanctuary, a haven for our people in a world that was still so hostile to us. The routine patrols, the guard duty, the mundane tasks I had once taken for granted, they were not burdens. They were the sacred duties that kept this sanctuary safe. We entered the city not as conquering heroes, but as weary soldiers returning from a grim task. The citizens of Orgrimmar went about their daily business, the smiths hammering, the merchants haggling, the children playing in the dust. They were blissfully unaware of the fell-tainted madness we had just purged from their doorstep. And that was as it should be. Our purpose was not to be celebrated. Our purpose was to allow them the peace of their ignorance. We were the wall that stood between our people and the darkness, and a wall does not ask for thanks. Our report was delivered directly to the Warchiefs' command in Hold. Grockner spoke, his words concise and factual. He detailed the Quillbore aggression, The discovery of the fell magic, the battle in the den, and the elimination of the orc warlock. He did not embellish our actions or minimize our losses. He presented the facts as they were. He mentioned Brack's injury, my lost shield, and the bravery of our entire unit. When he was finished, the officer, a high-ranking Core Crone elite, listened intently, his face a mask of stern concentration. "You have done well, Sergeant," the officer said, his voice a deep baritone. "You exceeded your orders, but your initiative was justified. This warlock, we have been hunting a coven of them for months. They call themselves the Burning Blade, remnants of the old ways. You have uncovered one of their nests. Your report will help us find the others." He looked at us, his eyes lingering on our weary, battered forms. "Get your wounded tended to. Get new gear issued. You have earned your rest. But be ready. The Horde will have need of you again soon." We were dismissed. There was no parade, no ceremony, just a simple acknowledgement of a job well done. Brack was sent to the apothecaries in the Cleft of Shadow, where the Forsaken and the Orc Shaman would tend to his arm. Zorka went to the Valley of Spirits to cleanse herself of the fell taint and report to her elders. Grockner simply nodded at me and walked away, likely to find a quiet corner to tend to his weapons and his thoughts. I was left alone, standing in the Valley of Strength, the sounds of my city washing over me. I had learned something vital in that dark cavern. I had learned about the enemy, yes, the insidious way the Legion's taint could linger, corrupting the land and its people. But I had also learned about my unit. I had seen Brack's foolish pride be forged into true courage. I had witnessed the quiet, immense power that Zorka wielded, a power not of rage but of balance. I had fought alongside Grockner and understood that his harshness was a form of protection, a shield he used to keep us alive. And I had learned something about myself. I had learned that when the choice came, I would stand for my comrades, that the shield on my back was not just for me, but for them. My path led me to the forges in the Valley of Honor. The air was blisteringly hot, filled with the rhythmic clang of hammers and the roar of the bellows. I found a master blacksmith, an old, scarred orc named Karg. I told him of my shield, how it had been destroyed in the line of duty. He looked at the bruises on my arm, the weariness in my eyes, and simply nodded. A shield that breaks in the defense of the Horde is a shield that has fulfilled its purpose, he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. It died an honorable death. We will make you a new one, stronger. It will be ready by morning. That night, I did not go to the tavern. I sat alone on the ramparts overlooking the city, a new waterskin of cool, clean water at my side. I looked out over the sleeping homes, the glowing forges, the silent training grounds. This was my Orgrimmar. This was my Horde. It was not perfect. It was loud and brutal and scarred by a history of war and loss. But it was ours. It was a home built by the hands of survivors, a promise made in blood and honor. My oath was not just to a war chief or to a banner. It was to the orc child sleeping in their cot, to the troll shaman communing with the spirits, to the Tauren elder telling stories by the fire. It was an oath to our shared survival. The events of the past days had not been a grand, epic battle that would be sung by the bards. It was a dirty, brutal, necessary task. It was the reality of a soldier's life. It was the endless war against the shadows. We had won a small victory, pushed back the darkness for one more day. But the darkness would return. It always did. I finished my water, the cool liquid of blessing in the warm night. A new shield would be waiting for me in the morning. A new watch would need to be stood. A new threat would eventually rise. My oath was renewed, not in a grand ceremony, but here, in the quiet solitude of the watch. Tomorrow, I would march again, for the Horde.